The year was 2287, and the stars belonged to anyone brave enough to claim them. Deep in the Arcturus sector, far from Earth and the safety of human colonies, the warship Vengeance cut through the darkness of space like a blade through water. She was a Titan-class battlecruiser, one of the most powerful ships humanity had ever built. Her hull stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, covered in armor plates that could withstand direct hits from plasma cannons. 800 men and women called her home. Captain Jack Morrison stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the view screen showing the endless void ahead. He was a tall man in his late 40s with gray starting to show in his dark hair. 23 years of service had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were telling him something was wrong. "Anything on sensors, Amy?" he asked. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at the sensor station, her fingers dancing across the controls. She was young, only 26, but she had the best eyes in the fleet when it came to reading sensor data. "Nothing yet, sir. Space is clean for 50 million kilometers in every direction." Commander Lisa Brennan stood beside the captain's chair. She was his second in command, a woman who had risen through the ranks by being smarter and tougher than everyone around her. "We're 3 days from the edge of explored space," she said quietly. "If there's anything out here we haven't seen before, we'll find it soon." The Vengeance was on a routine patrol, checking the outer boundaries of human territory. It was boring work most of the time. They would jump from system to system, scan for threats, and move on. In 3 months of patrol, they had found nothing but empty space and dead rocks orbiting distant suns. That changed in an instant. "Contact." Amy's voice cut through the bridge like a knife. "Unknown vessel bearing 270, distance 8 million kilometers and closing fast." Jack felt his heart rate pick up. In all his years of service, humanity had never encountered another intelligent species. They had found ruins on dead worlds, evidence that others had been there before, but never a living civilization. Until now, battle stations, he ordered. Throughout the ship, alarms began to sound. "Lisa, get me a visual as soon as possible." The crew of the Vengeance moved with practiced efficiency. Gun crews raced to their positions. Engineers checked the power systems. Marines grabbed their weapons and headed to defensive positions throughout the ship. They had trained for this moment, but training was different from reality. The alien ship appeared on the view screen, and every person on the bridge stopped breathing for a moment. It was huge, easily twice the size of the Vengeance. Its shape was all wrong, nothing like human designs. Where human ships were built for efficiency and function, this thing looked organic, almost alive. Its hull was covered in strange patterns that seemed to pulse with light. "They're scanning us," Amy reported. "I'm reading massive energy signatures washing over our hull. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." Down in engineering, Lieutenant Ben Crawford was already working on the problem. He was the chief engineer, a man who understood the Vengeance's systems better than anyone alive. His screens were lighting up with warnings. "Captain, whatever they're hitting us with is trying to penetrate our computer systems. Oracle is fighting it, but I don't know how long she can hold." Oracle was the ship's artificial intelligence, a quantum computer system that helped run everything from navigation to weapons control. She was the most advanced AI humanity had ever created, and right now she was under attack. "Raise shields," Jack ordered, "and hail them on all frequencies. Let's try to talk before this gets ugly." Lisa activated the communications system. "Unknown vessel, this is the human warship Vengeance. We come in peace. Please respond." There was no answer. On the alien ship, creatures unlike anything humans had ever imagined were studying their new discovery. They called themselves the Krell, and they had ruled this part of the galaxy for 10,000 years. The Krell were tall beings nearly 3 meters in height, with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished stone. Their eyes glowed with an inner light, and their minds were connected through neural implants that let them share thoughts instantly. War Master Thexnor commanded the Krell vessel. He looked at the primitive human ship on his display and felt something close to amusement. These creatures were so young, so weak. Their ship was powerful for their level of development, but compared to Krell technology, it was like comparing a sword to a nuclear weapon. "Continue the neural probe," he ordered his crew. "I want to know everything about these animals. Their language, their technology, their homeworld, everything." The Krell had a simple policy when they encountered new species. First, they scanned them to learn their capabilities. Then they decided if the species was useful for slavery, suitable for extermination, or advanced enough to require careful study before conquest. It was a system that had worked for thousands of years across dozens of star systems. Back on the Vengeance, things were getting worse. Dr. Helen Park, the chief science officer, was studying the alien scan from her laboratory. She was a brilliant woman, one of Earth's top experts in xenotechnology, and what she was seeing terrified her. "Captain, you need to hear this," she said over the comm system. "That scan isn't just reading our computers. It's trying to read our minds. It's a neural probe, designed to extract information directly from brain tissue." Jack felt ice in his veins. Can they do that? Can they actually read our thoughts? "I don't know," Helen admitted. "Human brains might be different enough from whatever species they've scanned before. But if they can, they'll learn everything we know. Our technology, our tactics, the location of Earth and all our colonies. How do we stop it? We can't. The probe already penetrated our systems before we raised shields. It's sampling neural patterns from crew members across the ship right now." Jack made a decision. "Ben, I need Oracle to do something for me. If they're probing us, I want her to probe them right back." "Can she trace that signal back to its source?" There was a pause. Then Ben's voice came back, excited. "She says yes. Oracle's already working on it. The probe uses quantum entanglement for data transmission. If she can analyze the quantum signature, she might be able to backtrack it and access their systems." Do it. For the next 10 minutes, an invisible war took place between two computer systems. The Krell probe dug deeper into human minds, sampling memories and experiences. It found violence there, endless centuries of human warfare, but the Krell didn't understand the context. They saw the violence, but not the reason behind it. Not the complex web of ethics and emotion that made humans different from any species they had encountered before. At the same time, Oracle was quietly infiltrating the Krell systems. She was learning their language, their technology, their tactics. Most importantly, she was learning where they came from and what they planned to do with the information they were gathering. When it was over, the alien ship simply turned and left. It accelerated away at impossible speeds, disappearing into the darkness between stars. The Krell had what they wanted, or so they thought. Jack stood on his bridge watching the alien ship vanish from his screens. His crew was shaken but alive. The ship was undamaged. By all accounts, the encounter had ended peacefully, but Jack knew better. He looked at the data Oracle had gathered, and he felt a cold certainty settle over him. The aliens had scanned them to determine if humanity was a threat. They had seen human history, human violence, human warfare, and they had made a decision, "Lisa," he said quietly. "Get me a quantum link to Earth Defense Command. Priority Alpha. What do we tell them?" Jack looked at the empty space where the alien ship had been. "We tell them that first contact has been made, and we tell them to prepare for war." Around him, the bridge crew began to understand what had happened. They had just been probed, studied, and catalogued by a species far more advanced than their own. And somewhere in the calculations that species was making, they had decided that humanity was a problem that needed to be dealt with. The Vengeance turned toward home, her engines burning at maximum power. They had a message to deliver, and every second counted. Behind them, in the depths of space, the Krell were already making plans. They had probed a human warship, learned its secrets, and marked humanity for conquest. They had no idea what they had just started. War Master Thexnor returned to the Krell home fleet with what he believed was a complete victory. His ship had scanned an unknown species, gathered all relevant data, and departed without firing a single shot. The Krell way was efficient like that. Why waste resources on combat when information could tell you everything you needed to know? The Krell staging area was located in the Xerxes Nebula, a massive cloud of gas and dust that made the perfect hiding place for a fleet. 300 warships waited there, the largest military force the Krell Dominion had assembled in 2,000 years. Supreme Overlord Krathzul commanded the fleet from his massive dreadnought, a ship so large it had its own artificial gravity and could carry 10,000 warriors. Thexnor stood before his Supreme Overlord in the command chamber, a vast room filled with holographic displays showing the fleet and surrounding space. Krathzul was old, even by Krell standards. He had lived for 6 centuries and commanded fleets that had conquered 47 star systems. He listened as Thexnor made his report. "The species calls themselves humans," Thexnor explained. "They are young, barely 200 cycles into space travel. Their technology is primitive compared to ours. One of our vessels equals 10 of theirs in firepower. Krathzul studied the holographic image of the Vengeance. And yet they built this ship. That shows some capability. What did the neural probe reveal about their nature? That is where things become interesting, my lord, Thexanor said. He activated another display, showing data extracted from human minds. They are a violent species. Extremely violent. Their entire recorded history is filled with warfare. Senior analyst Vexta stepped forward. She was a member of the science cast, responsible for interpreting data gathered from new species. She had studied the human neural patterns for hours, and what she found disturbed her in ways she couldn't fully explain. My lord, I must report something unusual, Vexta said. Her voice carried a note of concern that made several warriors turn to look at her. The humans are not like other species we have encountered. Their violence is different. Explain, Krathzul commanded. Vexta brought up images from human history. Battles fought with primitive weapons. Cities burning under bombardment. Soldiers charging into certain death. Most violent species we encounter use aggression as a survival mechanism. They fight when threatened, compete for resources, establish dominance hierarchies. This is normal across the galaxy. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Humans do all of this, but they also do something else. They make warfare into a science. They study it, perfect it, teach it to their young. They have entire institutions dedicated to learning how to fight better, and they never stop. Even when they have peace, they prepare for the next war. Thexanor waved a dismissive hand. So they are warlike. Many primitive species are. We have crushed dozens of them. You don't understand, Vexta insisted. I accessed the memories of their captain, Jack Morrison. His mind contained knowledge of human military history spanning thousands of years. Ancient generals who wrote books on strategy that humans still study today. Tactics developed centuries ago that they still teach in their military academies. They treat warfare like we treat mathematics, as a fundamental truth to be understood and mastered. She brought up more data, showing human weapons development through the ages. Look at their progress. They went from throwing rocks to splitting atoms in less than 10,000 years, from atoms to antimatter in less than 500. Their rate of advancement is unlike anything in our records. Krathzul studied the data with growing interest. What do you recommend? Caution, my lord. These humans are unpredictable. They may be primitive now, but they learn quickly. They adapt. Every war they fight teaches them something new, and they never forget the lessons. But Krathzul had not conquered 47 star systems by being cautious. He had done it by being decisive, by striking hard and fast before enemies could organize resistance. He looked at the data showing human colonies. Only 12 worlds spread across 30 light years. It was nothing compared to the Krell Dominion's hundreds of planets. I see a species with powerful ships but limited numbers, he said. I see worlds ripe for conquest and a race that will make excellent slaves once properly broken. Their violence will be useful in our gladiator pits. He turned to his fleet commanders. We will launch a subjugation campaign. 300 ships should be more than enough to crush their 12 worlds. We strike in 47 solar cycles. That gives us time to position the fleet and plan our attack routes. Thexanor bowed. It will be done, my lord. As the council dispersed, Vexta remained troubled. She had seen something in the human neural patterns that the warriors had missed. It wasn't just the violence that concerned her. It was the way humans thought about violence. They could be gentle with their families, compassionate with their friends, and absolutely ruthless with their enemies. They could separate these aspects of themselves in ways that seemed impossible. She had seen memories from the human captain's mind. Memories of him playing with his daughter, laughing at her jokes, tucking her into bed, and then memories of him in combat, making decisions that sent people to their deaths without hesitation. The same man, the same mind, holding both realities at once. How did you fight something like that? How did you conquer a species that could be both human and monster, depending on what the situation required? But her concerns were ignored. The Krell had made their decision. The location of Earth and her colonies had been transmitted to the Dominion's central computer. Attack plans were being drawn up. Resources were being allocated. The machine of conquest was in motion, and nothing could stop it now. What the Krell didn't know was that their neural probe had worked both ways. While they were sampling human minds, Oracle had been sampling theirs. The ship's AI had traced the quantum signature of the probe back to its source with a precision that would have shocked the Krell. She had infiltrated their system so quietly that their security programs never noticed. Oracle learned the Krell language in 3 seconds. She understood their technology in 30. By the time the probe disconnected, she had mapped their entire computer network, including the location of their home fleet in the Xerxes Nebula. She knew their ship designs, their weapons capabilities, their tactical doctrine. She knew everything. And Oracle had transmitted all of it back to Earth using a burst transmission so fast and so heavily encrypted that the Krell sensors never detected it. On Earth, in the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Kyle Harrison received the data from the Vengeance. He was the supreme commander of the human defense fleet, a man who had spent his entire adult life preparing for this moment. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew they weren't, and their new neighbors were planning to invade. Kyle called an emergency meeting of the Military Council. General Claire Matthews arrived first. She commanded the Marine Corps, 2 million men and women trained for ground combat. Admiral Scott Palmer came next, the head of Naval Intelligence, a man who knew more secrets than anyone alive. Director Megan Foster represented the Colonial Defense Initiative, responsible for protecting humanity's settlements on other worlds. They gathered in a secure room deep underground, where no signals could enter or exit without authorization. Kyle brought up the holographic display showing everything Oracle had learned from the Krell systems. "This is what we're facing," he said simply. 300 warships, each one more advanced than anything we've built. They're staging in the Xerxes Nebula, 40 light-years from Earth. They plan to attack in 47 days. Claire studied the Krell ship designs. "We're outgunned. Even if we mobilize every ship in the fleet, we'll barely match their numbers. And according to this data, their weapons are significantly more powerful than ours." "Can we evacuate the colonies?" Megan asked. Scott shook his head. "Not in 47 days. We'd need months to move that many people. And where would we send them? If Earth falls, there's nowhere to run." Kyle let them absorb the reality of the situation. Then he said something that would change everything. "We're not going to evacuate. And we're not going to defend. We're going to attack." The room went silent. Claire was the first to speak. "Attack?"
"Kyle, we just agreed we're outgunned."
"How can we possibly attack a force like that?" "Because they made a mistake," Kyle said. He pulled up the data Oracle had gathered. "The Krell have been the dominant power in this region for 10,000 years. They've forgotten what it's like to fight a real war. Look at their tactics. They rely on overwhelming force and technological superiority. They haven't faced an enemy who could match them in 1,000 years." He zoomed in on the Krell command structure. And more importantly, they made one critical error. They probed us to learn our weaknesses, but in doing so, they gave us access to their systems. We know where they are. We know how they fight. We know their technology inside and out. Scott leaned forward. "You want to hit them before they hit us." "I want to hit them so hard they never consider attacking humanity again," Kyle said. "We have 47 days. That's enough time to mobilize the fleet and get into position. The Krell think they're hidden in that nebula. They think they have the element of surprise. We're going to prove them wrong." Claire smiled. The call went out across human space on a quantum network that connected every colony, every station, every ship. It was simple and direct. All military personnel were to report for duty immediately. All warships were to prepare for departure. All civilian traffic was to be restricted until further notice. Earth was going to war. Commander Greg Newton sat in the strategic planning room at Earth Defense Command, surrounded by displays showing fleet positions, supply lines, and tactical simulations. He was 32 years old and already considered the best strategic mind in the fleet. He had studied every major battle in human history, from ancient times to the space age. Now he would plan the most important battle humanity had ever fought. Greg looked at the data Oracle had provided. The Krell fleet was positioned in the Xerxes Nebula, a cloud of gas and dust so thick that conventional sensors couldn't see through it. The Krell thought this made them invisible. Greg saw it as an opportunity. "The nebula works both ways," he explained to Admiral Harrison. "If they can't see out clearly, we can hide in there with them. The radiation and particle density will mask our ships just as well as it masks theirs." Kyle studied the tactical map. "How do we get our ships into position without being detected?" "We come in dark," Greg said. "Minimal power, no active sensors, using the nebula's natural movement to drift into position. It will take time, but the Krell won't expect us to be inside their own staging area." "What about bait?" If we're going to ambush them, we need to give them a target. Greg smiled. That's where the vengeance comes in. She's already encountered them. We send her back, make it look like she's damaged and alone. The Krell won't be able to resist capturing a human warship intact. The plan started coming together. Admiral Harrison approved it and began issuing orders. Within hours, ships across human space began moving toward their rally points. The Vengeance limped back to Earth for repairs and resupply. Captain Jack Morrison stood on the dock watching repair crews swarm over his ship. She had taken some minor damage during a training exercise, nothing serious, but they needed to make it look worse for the operation to work. Lisa Brennan joined him on the dock. The crew knows something big is coming. They can feel it. Good, Jack said. They'll need to be sharp for what we're about to do. We're going to deliberately walk into a trap, and the only thing keeping us alive will be knowing that our fleet is waiting in the wings. You trust the plan? I trust that Greg Newton is smarter than any Krell strategist. And I trust that our people are meaner than theirs when it comes down to fighting. He turned to face her. The Krell have been conquering weaker species for thousands of years. But they've never fought anyone who fought back hard enough to hurt them. We're about to change that. Across Earth and her colonies, the mobilization continued. The shipyards at Mars worked around the clock, making final repairs and loading weapons. The training grounds at Titan echoed with the sound of Marines running drills. The research labs at Europa buzzed with activity as scientists worked on new weapons. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Hughes led a team of engineers in a secret facility beneath the lunar surface. They were working on something special, a weapon specifically designed to counter Krell technology. Ryan had studied the shield systems Oracle had mapped, and he found a weakness. Krell shields work by creating a quantum field that disperses incoming energy, he explained to his team. But quantum fields have to maintain coherence. If we hit them with a series of precisely timed pulses, we can create interference patterns that collapse the field. His lead scientist, a woman named Dr. Kate Sullivan, nodded. Like noise-canceling headphones, but for force fields. We create waves that are exactly opposite to theirs. Exactly. I've designed a missile warhead that releases these pulses. One missile probably won't do it, but a coordinated salvo from multiple ships should punch right through their shields. They built 3,000 of the new missiles in 2 weeks, working day and night. Each one was programmed to coordinate with the others, creating a cascading effect that would overwhelm Krell defensive systems. It was untested in combat, but they wouldn't get a chance to test it before the real battle. While engineers worked on weapons, scientists worked on something else entirely. Dr. Kate Sullivan's main project wasn't the missiles. It was something far more dangerous. A computer virus designed to infiltrate Krell systems. The Krell relied heavily on neural interfaces, technology that connected their minds directly to their ship's computers. Oracle had mapped how these interfaces worked during the initial probe. Kate and her team used that information to create a virus that could spread through neural links. It's elegant, really, Kate explained to Admiral Harrison during a briefing. The Krell used their neural probes to extract information from enemies. Our virus piggybacks on those same probes. When they try to scan us, they infect themselves. What does the virus do? It creates false data in their tactical systems. Wrong distances, incorrect shield strengths, fake ship positions. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to throw off their targeting. In a close battle, that could make the difference between hitting and missing. How do we deploy it? That's the beauty of it. We don't have to. We load it into the neural patterns of our Marines. When the Krell board the Vengeance and try to probe our people for information, the virus transfers to their systems through the neural link. Kyle smiled. So we're using their own technology against them. That's the idea. They think neural probes are a one-way street. We're about to show them they're wrong. The fleet began gathering at the rally point, a location in deep space far from any system. Warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in flashes of blue light. Carriers, battlecruisers, destroyers, support ships. By the end of the third week, over 300 vessels had assembled. Admiral Harrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dauntless, watching the fleet take shape. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. Every ship they had that could fight was here. If this operation failed, Earth would be defenseless. General Claire Matthews was aboard the Dauntless as well, preparing her Marines for what was coming. She walked through the hangar bays where thousands of troops checked their equipment. These men and women would be boarding Krell ships during the battle, fighting in close quarters where superior technology mattered less than training and determination. Listen up, Claire addressed a group of Marines preparing for deployment. The enemy is bigger than us. Their weapons are more powerful. Their armor is thicker. None of that matters.
You know why?
Because they've been fighting weak opponents for so long they've forgotten what a real fight looks like. You're going to remind them. The Marines cheered. They were scared, everyone was, but they were also angry. The Krell had marked humanity for conquest, and that was a mistake they would pay for. Major Dan Cooper led one of the Marine battalions. He was a veteran of the Colony Wars, a series of conflicts between human settlements in the early days of expansion. He had fought in zero gravity, in hostile atmospheres, in every hellish environment the galaxy could throw at him. Now he would fight aliens. Our job is to board enemy ships and cause chaos, Dan briefed his troops. We use hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, traps, make them afraid to turn a corner. The Krell have better weapons, so we don't fight fair. We fight smart. He pulled up a holographic display showing a Krell ship's interior layout. Oracle gave us detailed schematics. We know their weaknesses. Their primary corridors are too narrow for their full height, so they have to stoop. That slows them down. Their neural implants can be overloaded with electromagnetic pulses, and their culture values individual glory over team tactics. We use all of that against them. Back on Earth, families said goodbye to loved ones heading off to war. Children hugged parents who might not come back. Spouses held each other tight, making promises they might not be able to keep. It was a scene as old as warfare itself, repeated across human history on countless battlefields. Now it was happening on a galactic scale. Jack Morrison spoke to his daughter via video link before the Vengeance departed. She was 12 years old, living with her mother on Earth. He told her he loved her and that he would be home soon. He didn't tell her that the Vengeance would be the bait in a trap, that his ship would deliberately make itself vulnerable to enemy capture. Some things a father didn't share with his child. After the call ended, Jack stood alone in his quarters for a long moment. Then he put on his uniform, straightened his shoulders, and headed to the bridge. There was work to do. Lieutenant Ben Crawford made final checks on the Vengeance's systems. The ship's engines could run at 140% capacity for short bursts, well beyond their normal limits. The weapons were loaded with the new shield-piercing missiles. The computer core held the virus ready to be deployed. Everything was ready. Amy Rodriguez practiced with the sensor systems, learning to pick out the faint signatures that would indicate hidden ships in the nebula. She ran through simulation after simulation until she could identify a powered-down warship by the slight heat signature alone. The fleet began moving toward the Xerxes Nebula. They traveled in small groups, taking different routes, timed to arrive in sequence rather than all at once. They couldn't risk the Krell detecting The Vengeance drifted into the outer edge of the Xerxes Nebula, like a wounded animal limping home. Her port side showed visible damage from what appeared to be a recent battle. Burn marks scorched her hull. One of her engine nacelles flickered with unstable power. To anyone watching, she looked like a ship barely holding together. It was all an illusion. The damage was real enough, but it was carefully controlled. Ben Crawford had spent days making sure the ship looked hurt, while keeping all critical systems at full capability. The flickering engine could go to full power in seconds. The burned hull plating was mostly cosmetic, but to Krell sensors, the Vengeance appeared to be easy prey. Jack Morrison sat in his command chair watching the sensor displays. They showed the Krell fleet ahead, 300 ships in a defensive formation around the nebula's core. The human fleet was out there somewhere, scattered through the gas clouds, powered down to nothing. He couldn't see them on sensors. He had to trust they were there. Distance to the Krell fleet? He asked. Amy checked her readings. 5 million kilometers in closing. We're well within their sensor range now. They have to see us. Let's make sure they do. Ben, vent some plasma from the damaged engine. Make it look like we're having trouble. In the engineering section, Ben opened the venting valves. A stream of glowing plasma erupted from the engine nacelle, clearly visible against the darkness of space. It was like waving a flag at a bull. On the Krell command ship, War Master Thexnor saw the damaged human vessel approaching and felt satisfaction. The ship was the same one he had scanned weeks ago. Apparently, they had encountered trouble and were fleeing back to their territory. This was an opportunity too good to pass up. The human warship is damaged, he reported to Supreme Overlord Krathzul. With your permission, I will take 6 ships and capture it. A human warship intact would provide valuable intelligence. Krathzel considered this. The main fleet would attack human space in 3 days. Having detailed information about their ship designs would be useful, and capturing the ship that had first contacted them would be a symbol of Krell dominance. You may proceed, Krathzel decided, but be cautious. Even wounded animals can bite. Thexnor gathered 5 other war masters and their ships. 6 Krell vessels broke formation and accelerated toward the Vengeance. They moved with confidence, predators closing on prey. Jack watched them come. 6 ships. That was more than he hoped for, but within acceptable limits. Lisa broadcast on all frequencies. Make it sound desperate. Lisa activated the communications system. Unknown vessels, this is the human ship Vengeance. We are experiencing critical systems failure. We mean you no harm. Please do not attack. The Krell didn't respond. They never negotiated with prey. Throughout the nebula, the human fleet stirred. On 300 ships, captains watched their tactical displays and waited for the signal. Their crews had been at battle stations for hours, waiting in silence, ready to move at an instant's notice. The Krell ships closed to within 50,000 kilometers. Their weapons were charged but not firing. They wanted the ship intact. Tractor beams locked onto the Vengeance's hull, powerful force fields designed to immobilize the human vessel. They've got us, Ben reported. Tractor beams at full power. We could break free, but it would give away that we're not really damaged. Hold position, Jack ordered. Let them think they've won. The 6 Krell ships surrounded the Vengeance, forming a net of overlapping tractor beams. Then they began to move, dragging the human ship deeper into the nebula away from their main fleet. They were being cautious, making sure the capture happened far from the bulk of their forces in case it was a trick. Jack smiled grimly. They were cautious, but not cautious enough. The Krell were pulling them deeper into the nebula, deeper into the cloud of gas and dust where 300 human warships waited in the darkness. Prepare boarding parties, Thexnor commanded. I want that ship's computer core intact. And capture some of the crew alive. We will probe them for information about human defenses. Krell warriors gathered at the airlocks, massive creatures in battle armor that made them even larger. Each carried weapons that could punch through steel. They were confident, as they always were. They had boarded 1,000 ships before and never met resistance they couldn't crush. Major Dan Cooper waited in the Vengeance's corridors with his Marines. They were spread throughout the ship in small teams, hidden in side passages and maintenance shafts. The main corridors were almost empty, just a skeleton crew visible to make the Krell think the ship was understaffed. Remember the plan, Dan told his people over the tactical network. Let them board. Let them spread out. Then we hit them fast and hard. Our job isn't to win the boarding action. It's to cause chaos and buy time. The Krell ships clamped onto the Vengeance's hull at 3 points. Cutting beams sliced through armor plating. Bulkheads groaned under the stress. Then the Krell were inside, moving through the corridors in groups of 10. They found the ship strangely empty. A few human crew members fled before them, running deeper into the ship. The Krell pursued, spreading out to cover more area, trying to round up prisoners and secure critical systems. That's when the ambush started. Marines emerged from hiding spots and opened fire. The new electromagnetic pulse weapons overloaded Krell neural implants, causing the aliens to stumble and lose coordination. Conventional firearms tore into their armor at point-blank range. A group of Krell turned a corner and ran straight into a trap. The corridor exploded as hidden charges detonated. The concussion knocked the aliens off their feet. Before they could recover, Marines rushed in with close-range weapons, firing at vulnerable joints in the armor. The Krell were shocked. They had expected frightened prey, not organized resistance. Their individual combat skills were superior to any single human, but the humans didn't fight as individuals. They fought as teams, supporting each other, using tactics the Krell had never encountered. Dan Cooper led an assault on one of the boarding parties personally. His Marines used the ship's layout to their advantage, attacking from multiple directions at once, using fire and movement techniques perfected over centuries of human warfare. The Krell were stronger and better armed, but they were fighting on human ground with human rules. In one compartment, Marines sealed the doors and vented the atmosphere. Krell could survive in vacuum for a short time, but it disoriented them. When they tried to break through the sealed doors, they found explosives waiting on the other side. Thexnor watched the boarding action from his ship and grew concerned. His warriors were reporting heavy resistance. They were taking casualties. This wasn't how boarding actions were supposed to go. Prey didn't fight back like this. Send more warriors, he commanded. And prepare to use the neural probes on any prisoners we take. I want to know why they're fighting so hard. More Krell boarded the Vengeance. The fighting intensified. Marines fell back through the corridors, leading the aliens deeper into the ship, away from their entry points. It looked like a retreat, but it was actually a plan. On the bridge, Amy Rodriguez watched her sensors carefully. Captain, I'm detecting power fluctuations in the Krell ships. They're focusing their attention on the boarding action. Good, Jack said. That means they're not watching for other threats. Oracle, are you ready? The ship's artificial intelligence responded immediately. Affirmative. The virus package is prepared and loaded into the neural patterns of 17 Marines currently engaged with Krell boarding parties. Do it. In the corridors where fighting raged, Krell warriors finally started capturing Marines. They dragged prisoners back to their ships and immediately began neural probe procedures. They wanted information about human defenses, troop strength, ship capabilities. The neural probes connected to human minds and began extracting data. But they also received data. Code hidden so deep in human neural patterns that the Krell scanners didn't detect it. The virus spread from Marine to Krell neural implant, then from implant to ship systems, propagating silently through the network. On his ship, Thexnor suddenly noticed anomalies in his tactical display. Ship positions seemed slightly off. Energy readings fluctuated. Distance calculations didn't quite match visual observations. He assumed it was interference from the nebula and adjusted his sensors. He had no idea his entire system had just been compromised. Jack Morrison waited for the right moment. The Krell had committed more forces to the boarding action. Their ships were focused inward, their attention on the Vengeance rather than the surrounding space. Their sensors were degraded by the virus, showing them false data mixed with real information. Lisa, broadcast the signal, Jack ordered. All frequencies maximum power. Lisa sent out a single word in plain language. Execute. Throughout the Xerxes Nebula, 300 human warships came to life. Reactors that had been barely ticking over suddenly roared to full power. Weapons systems that had been cold charged to firing readiness. Engines that had been dark blazed with light. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Admiral Kyle Harrison watched his tactical display light up with green icons as the fleet activated. All ships, this is Admiral Harrison. Commence Opération Checkmate. Show them what happens when they threaten humanity. The human fleet surged forward out of the gas clouds like sharks emerging from murky water. They had been positioned carefully, surrounding the Kur. The Battle of Xerxes Nebula began in chaos and fire. 300 human warships appeared from every direction, emerging from the gas clouds like ghosts materializing into reality. The Krell had expected to hunt a wounded ship. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by an armada. Supreme Overlord Krathzul stood on his command deck and watched his tactical display fill with enemy contacts. For a moment, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. How had an entire fleet gotten so close without detection? The nebula's interference should have made that impossible. All ships battle formation, he commanded, his voice carrying across the neural network that connected all Krell commanders. Prepare to engage on all vectors. But the Krell fleet was not ready for battle. They were in a staging formation, ships clustered together for efficiency rather than combat. They needed time to spread out, to bring weapons to bear, to coordinate their response. The humans didn't give them that time. Admiral Kyle Harrison watched from the Dauntless as his battle plan unfolded. All ships, weapons free. Hit them hard and hit them fast. Don't give them time to think. The human fleet opened fire as 300 ships unleashing everything they had. Missiles by the thousands streaked through space. Energy beams painted lines of destruction across the darkness. Railguns accelerated metal slugs to a fraction of light speed, turning simple projectiles into devastating weapons. The first wave of fire struck the Krell fleet like a hammer. Ships that had been confidently preparing for invasion suddenly found themselves fighting for survival. The new shield disruption missiles worked exactly as designed, creating interference patterns that collapsed Krell defensive fields. Without shields, even the powerful Krell ships were vulnerable. Captain Jack Morrison brought the Vengeance into the thick of the fighting. His ship was already damaged from the boarding action, with Krell warriors still on board fighting as Marines, but that didn't stop him. Target the nearest heavy cruiser. All forward batteries fire. The Vengeance's guns spoke with thunder. Missiles launched in waves, each one timed to hit microseconds after the last overwhelming point defenses. Energy weapons carved into armor plating. The Krell cruiser tried to maneuver, tried to bring its own weapons to bear, but the Vengeance was too close and too fast. "Captain, we still have Krell on board," Lisa reminded him. "If we take hits in the wrong place, we could lose compartments with our own Marines in them." "Dan knew the risks when he signed up for this," Jack said grimly. "Trust him to keep his people alive. We need to focus on the battle." Deep in the Vengeance's corridors, Major Dan Cooper was doing exactly that. His Marines had fallen back to the ship's central core, establishing defensive positions that gave them good fields of fire. The Krell were stronger and tougher, but they had to come through narrow corridors to get to the humans, and that negated their advantages. "Hold this line," Dan ordered his troops. "Make every shot count. We just need to keep them busy until the battle is over." A group of Krell charged down a corridor, weapons blazing. Marines opened fire from covered positions. Electromagnetic pulse grenades disrupted neural implants. Conventional weapons targeted joints and weak points in armor. The Krell kept coming, stepping over their dead, but the Marines held. Outside, the space battle raged with an intensity the Krell had never experienced. Human ships moved in coordinated groups, covering each other, focusing fire on single targets until they were destroyed before moving to the next. It was pack-hunting tactics applied to space warfare, and the Krell had no defense against it. The Krell fought back with the superior technology and firepower. Their weapons were more powerful than human equivalents. Their ships could take more damage, but they fought as individuals, each captain seeking glory, each ship operating independently. The humans fought as a fleet, as a single organism with hundreds of parts all working toward one goal. Admiral Scott Palmer commanded a battle group of 30 ships, focusing on the Krell left flank. "Target the command vessels. Take out their leadership, and the rest will lose coordination." His ships swept in on attack runs, moving at speeds that stressed their inertial compensators to the limit. They launched missiles from maximum range, then closed to finish damaged targets with energy weapons. 3 Krell command ships died in as many minutes, their destruction sending ripples of confusion through the alien fleet. General Claire Matthews watched from the Dauntless as Marine assault ships penetrated deep into the Krell formation. These small, fast vessels carried teams of Marines whose job was to board enemy ships and cause chaos. It was dangerous work, with casualties expected to be high, but it was effective. One assault ship, commanded by Lieutenant Jake Warren, attached itself to a Krell carrier. Marines cut through the hull and poured into the enemy vessel. The Krell were not prepared for boarding actions during a fleet battle. They expected such things to happen after a ship was disabled, not in the middle of active combat. Jake's Marines moved through the Krell ship with brutal efficiency. They had studied the ship layouts Oracle provided and knew exactly where to hit. Engineering sections, life support, command centers. They used demolition charges to wreck critical systems, making the ship a liability to its fleet rather than an asset. "Plant the charges and get out," Jake ordered. "This ship is going to blow in 5 minutes whether we're on it or not." The Marines fought their way back to their assault ship, pursued by Krell warriors. They made it with seconds to spare, detaching just as the charges detonated. The Krell carrier's reactor lost containment, and the ship disappeared in a flash of light that briefly outshone nearby stars. Supreme Overlord Krath Zul watched his fleet being torn apart and felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: fear. The humans were not fighting like a primitive species. They were fighting like masters of warfare, using tactics and strategies that showed deep understanding of space combat. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "Our technology is superior. Our weapons are more powerful. Why are we losing?" Senior Analyst Vextha had the answer, though speaking it gave her no pleasure. "Because we have forgotten how to fight, my lord. We have spent so long conquering weaker species that we never learned to face equals. The humans have spent their entire history fighting each other. War is not something they do occasionally." "It is something they are," Krath Zul snarled in frustration. "Then we will crush them with numbers. All ships converge on the human flagship. If we kill their leader, they will break." It was a mistake. The human fleet was not built around one leader. Every captain knew the plan. Every ship could operate independently if needed. But more than that, the Krell were doing exactly what the humans wanted them to do: Admiral Kyle Harrison saw the Krell fleet converging on his position. They're taking the bait. All ships execute flanking maneuver Delta. The human fleet split into 3 groups. One group, including the Dauntless, held position and drew the Krell forward. The other 2 groups swung wide to either side, using the nebula's gas clouds for cover. When the Krell fleet had committed to their attack on the center, the flanking group struck from both sides. The Krell found themselves caught in a crossfire with no way out. Ships trying to target the center group were hit from the sides. Ships turning to face the flanking groups exposed their rear to the center. It was a classic pincer movement, a tactic as old as warfare itself, and the Krell had no answer for it. "Focus all fire on the enemy flagship," Kyle ordered. "If they want to kill me so badly, let's see if they can protect their own leader." Every human ship in range turned their weapons on Krathzul's dreadnought. The massive Krell vessel was the toughest ship in their fleet, with armor meters thick and shields that could withstand nuclear weapons. But it couldn't withstand concentrated fire from 100 human warships all at once. The shield disruption missiles hit first, creating cascading failures in the defensive systems. Then the main weapons hit: missiles, railgun rounds, energy beams, everything humanity could throw at a single target. The dreadnought's armor held for almost 30 seconds under the barrage. Then it failed. Secondary explosions rippled through the Krell flagship. Engineering sections lost containment. Command centers vaporized. The ship, which had seemed invincible, began to come apart. Krathzul had time for one final thought before his ship's reactor went critical. He realized in that last moment that the humans had never planned to fight fair. They had studied Krell tactics, learned their weaknesses, and exploited them ruthlessly. War to humanity wasn't about honor or glory. It was about winning no matter what it took. The dreadnought exploded with the force of a small sun. The blast was so powerful it destroyed 15 nearby Krell ships that were caught in the antimatter detonation. Shockwaves rippled through the battle space, throwing ships off course and disrupting sensor readings. When the flash cleared, the Krell fleet was broken. Without their supreme overlord, without central command, the alien ships lost coordination. Some tried to continue fighting. Others attempted to flee. All of them found human ships waiting, weapons ready, showing no mercy. War Master Thexnor, his own ship crippled and venting atmosphere, made a decision. He broadcast a message to all surviving Krell vessels. "Retreat. Fall back to the rally point. We cannot win this battle." Of the 300 ships that 3 weeks after the Battle of Xerxes Nebula, Captain Jack Morrison led a task force deep into Krell territory. The Vengeance had been repaired, her hull patches still gleaming new against the older armor. Around her flew 20 other human warships. Not enough to conquer the Krell homeworld, but enough to deliver a message that could not be ignored. They arrived at Krell Prime on a morning when 3 suns rose over the alien capital. The planet was beautiful in its own way, with cities that stretched for hundreds of kilometers and orbital stations that had existed for millennia. The Krell had built an empire here, ruled from this world, sent their fleets out to conquer in every direction. Now a human fleet hung in orbit above their capital, and there was nothing they could do about it. War Master Thexnor, one of the few senior commanders to survive the battle, stood in the Great Council chamber and faced the judgment of his people. The council was made up of the oldest and wisest Krell, beings who had lived for centuries and guided their species through countless challenges. They were not accustomed to hearing reports of defeat. "Explain to us how 300 warships were destroyed by a primitive species," Council Elder Mortash demanded. "Explain how an invasion fleet was shattered before it even reached enemy territory." Thexnor kept his head high despite his shame. "The humans are not primitive, Elder. That was our mistake from the beginning. They have technology nearly equal to ours, and their tactical thinking is superior. We based our assessment on the age of their spacefaring civilization without considering their long history of warfare among themselves. One species divided against itself should be weak," another elder said. "That is the pattern we have seen across the galaxy." "The humans are different," Senior Analyst Vextha spoke up from where she stood beside Thexnor. "Their internal conflicts did not weaken them. They strengthened them. Every war taught them lessons. Every conflict refined their tactics. By the time they reached space, they had thousands of years of military experience to draw upon." She brought up holographic displays showing the battle. "Look at how they fought. Perfect coordination between ships. tactics designed to exploit our weaknesses. They even used our own neural probe technology against us, delivering a computer virus through the very systems we thought gave us an advantage. The council members watched the battle replay in silence. They saw their mighty fleet torn apart by an enemy that should have been easy prey. They saw tactics they had never encountered before, strategies that turned Krell strengths into weaknesses. What do they want? Elder Mortash finally asked. The human fleet sits in orbit above our capital. They could bombard our cities, destroy our infrastructure. Why do they wait? They want to talk, Thexnor said. They want to dictate terms. We do not accept terms from lesser species, another elder said angrily. Then we will be destroyed, Vextha said flatly. The humans have all of our fleet data. They know the location of every Krell world, every military installation, every defensive position. Their computer virus has compromised our networks. They could cripple our entire civilization if they chose to. The only reason they haven't is because they prefer negotiation to extermination. The council fell silent at that. The idea that they were at the mercy of another species was foreign to them, almost incomprehensible. But the evidence was there, hanging in orbit above their world. What are their terms? Elder Mortash asked quietly. On the Vengeance, Commander Lisa Brennan prepared the broadcast. It would go out on every Krell communication channel, ensuring that not just the leadership, but every Krell citizen would hear humanity's message. Jack had insisted on that. He wanted no room for misunderstanding. Ready when you are, Captain, Lisa said. Jack stood before the camera, wearing his dress uniform with all the medals he had earned in 23 years of service. Behind him, the bridge crew worked at their stations, a reminder that this was an active warship, not a diplomatic vessel. People of the Krell Dominion, he began. I am Captain Jack Morrison of the human warship Vengeance. 3 weeks ago, your fleet attempted to invade human space. That invasion failed. Your forces were defeated in battle, and your supreme overlord was killed. We could have pursued your surviving ships back to this world. We could have done to you what you planned to do to us. But we didn't because humanity believes in something your empire has forgotten, the possibility of peace. He paused, letting that sink in. We come here today not to conquer but to establish terms. These terms are not negotiable. First, the Krell Dominion will cease all expansionist military activities. Your era of conquest is over. Second, you will release all species that have been subjugated within the past century. They will be given the choice to remain as free citizens within your territory or to leave. Third, you will establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity and recognize our sovereignty over our current territory and any worlds we choose to settle in the future. Jack's voice hardened. In exchange for these terms, humanity will not press further into Krell space. We will not destroy your civilization or interfere with your internal affairs. We will share defensive technology to help you rebuild your fleet, because we would rather have you as a strong neighbor than a weak victim for other predators. But make no mistake, if you choose to refuse these terms, we have the capability and the will to enforce them through military action. He leaned forward slightly. You probed our ship seeking information. You learned about human warfare, but you didn't understand what you learned. War to humanity is not just something we do. It is something we have perfected over thousands of years. We know every trick, every tactic, every strategy. We have fought wars with every weapon from sticks to antimatter. And we have learned the most important lesson of all. The goal of war is not glory or conquest. The goal is to win decisively and end the conflict on terms favorable to your survival. You have 48 hours to respond to these terms. If you accept, we will begin immediate negotiations on implementation. If you refuse, we will take your silence as an act of continued hostility and respond accordingly. The choice is yours. The broadcast ended. Across Krell Prime and throughout their empire, billions of aliens watched and listened. For many of them, it was the first time they had even seen a human. This strange bipedal creature, so small compared to a Krell warrior, speaking with absolute confidence about dictating terms to an empire 10,000 years old. The Krell High Council debated for 2 days. Some argued for continued resistance. Others pointed out the futility of fighting an enemy that had already proven superior. In the end, pragmatism won over pride. Elder Mortash personally delivered the Krell response. We accept your terms, Captain Morrison. The Krell Dominion will honor this agreement. The formal negotiations took another 3 weeks. Human diplomats led by Ambassador Carol Hughes worked with Krell officials to establish the framework for a new relationship between their species. It was not friendly, not at first. Too much blood had been spilled for that. But it was functional. The Krell agreed to release 23 conquered species from bondage. Some chose to leave Krell space immediately. Others, surprisingly, chose to stay as free citizens, having built lives there over generations. The Krell struggled with this concept of giving rights to lesser species, but they learned. Technology transfers began. Human engineers worked with Krell scientists to share defensive systems while carefully avoiding offensive weapons. The Krell were surprised to find that human computers, while less powerful than theirs, were more resilient to cyber attacks. The humans had learned the hard way, through centuries of hacking and digital warfare, how to build secure systems. Captain Jack Morrison was promoted to admiral and given command of the Second Fleet, responsible for patrolling the border between human and Krell space. The Vengeance became his flagship, her name now known across a dozen star systems. Admiral Kyle Harrison became Grand Admiral, the highest military rank in human forces. He oversaw the expansion of the fleet and the establishment of new defensive positions. Under his leadership, humanity began a program of rapid expansion, claiming worlds and building colonies at a pace that worried other galactic powers. Lieutenant Ben Crawford left the Vengeance to become chief engineer at the new shipyards being built at Mars. His job was to design the next generation of human warships, incorporating lessons learned from the battle with the Krell. The ships he designed would be faster, tougher, and more lethal than anything humanity had built before. Major Dan Cooper received the Stellar Cross for his defense of the Vengeance during the boarding action. He was promoted to colonel and given command of a new Marine division specifically trained for ship-to-ship combat. His tactics became required study at every military academy. Dr. Kate Sullivan continued her work on cyber warfare systems. The virus she had created became the template for a whole new class of weapons, ones that turned enemy technology against itself. Other species began to fear human computer systems, knowing that connecting to them could mean infection. On Earth, the public reaction to the war was mixed. Some celebrated the victory, proud that humanity had proven itself on the galactic stage. Others worried about the cost, the lives lost, the enemies made. But everyone agreed on one thing: the galaxy would never see humanity as weak again. The Krell adapted slow,